the stuff that's making the money is usually not the fun stuff. It's not the glamorous stuff. You just got to grind and think smart and make the right decisions, you know? No, you got to watch the tricksters. A lot of those guys out there with Lamborghinis are renting them. Hey, welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Eat, Sleep, and Invest. I'm your host, Brian Driscoll, and I'm here with Terrence Murphy. What's going on, Terrence?
Thanks, Brian, for having me, man. I'm excited to be on your podcast and your show, and it's good to hear about what you're doing. It was great to connect before the show.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, man. So you have a pretty interesting background. You're in real estate. You were in football. Like, give me a little bit of background on what all you've been into.
Yeah, so I played football at Texas A&M. I was a 4-year starter, two-time team captain, All-American, All-Conference, blah, 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 Texas A&M. Set about 50-plus records when I graduated, and then I actually went to the NFL. I was in the Aaron Rodgers draft class, so he was our first pick in the draft, and I was the second pick for the Green Bay Packers. So we were roommates, good friends. I played wide receiver. And then I had a neck injury, Monday Night Football, really bad neck injury. I actually got temporarily paralyzed. And worked my way back from that and decided to rebuild myself as an entrepreneur and was just praying for a passion, and that passion was real estate. So I got into finance and real estate, and that's what kind of led me to today.
Man, that's crazy, too. So say back, like, when you had that accident, too, that had to sting. Like, how'd that affect you? Not necessarily physically, but it pretty much changed your life, right?
Yeah, it set me on a new path. And now looking back, I'm starting to slowly unravel what that was about. I think a lot of times in life happens to us, and it's how we respond. And I'll say I didn't always respond well, but over time I've learned to deal with it. I've learned to kind of pick up and move forward. And in that real estate, I've been able to start up real estate companies, develop golf course communities, multifamily, commercial, student housing, and I also did a startup real estate brokerage that I scaled to 1.4 billion in sales in like the first 8 years. So it's been fun, man. Now I have the Terrence Murphy companies, where I have over 54 companies that I've started, founded, or invested in, and I'm trying to keep growing that portfolio.
And yeah, you're right too, because like I've been punched in the face hard also, and I think a lot of people listen and have, and you're right, it puts you on a different trajectory, and it sucks at the time, but sometimes looking back, you're like, okay, if that didn't happen, I wouldn't be where I am now. So it's like glass half full, glass half empty, you know?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing I try to encourage everybody in life, you know, there was a time in my life I was considered a top 10, top 15 college football player. And then obviously making it to the NFL, you know, top 1% in the world of doing something. And then I went on that same passion, that same mindset to prove myself. And I did it in real estate sales. I was a top 1% real estate broker in the United States. And when I got to the pinnacle of both of those careers in sales and as an athlete, if you're not careful, you'll tie your identity into that. And so what I'm always trying to encourage, I call my tribe, the real estate entrepreneurs, is to make sure that you're keeping balance, you're focusing on mental health, and you're really understanding why you're sacrificing. Is it for your kids? Is it for your future? It's got to be tied to a big why. So that's really what I've been focusing on now. Like right now, I'm at my ranch. I actually retired at 22 when I got injured, took off 2 years, got back on the horse, and then retired again at 38. So it's been something that you just got to really focus on why you're doing it.
You're right too. Yeah. Especially with identity, because a lot of people are like, yeah, this is just what I do. And then if that stops, you don't know what you're supposed to be doing then.
Yeah. I've been there a couple of times. Yeah. One of the things when I meet people, immediately they ask, so what do you do? And I just tell them I'm in sales. Like I just keep it basic. Because we're so focused on who are you, what do you do? And then that's how they gauge what kind of energy they're going to give you and what kind of time. And so I'm so like focused on just being organic and real with people. I think that's the most important component to life.
So a question for you here. So you're playing football, right? What's that process like? Because it's hard to get in the NFL. Like, what's that process like in the politics and stuff too? Because you probably have to have an agent, right? And then you're playing that game to like get on the teams. Like, how's that work?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to it. It's no different than business. I always tell people business is warfare. I remember hearing that quote years ago. And I was like, well, man, it can't be more competitive than making it to the NFL. But the difference between the NFL is you're kind of shielded from some of the politics. Like there's going to be politics, but you're kind of shielded, right? And because there's pariahs out there, right? But in business, especially when you start taking market share and moving to the top of the food chain, it's really competitive. And so what I'm always telling the people that I coach and train is just make sure you focus on the fundamentals, because all the sexy stuff, doing TikTok videos, doing reels, standing in front of Lamborghinis or your brand new self-storage or your multifamily, that all looks good, but make sure you really are building a business with a solid foundation.
Yeah, and you're right too. Like I see a lot of people doing that. It's like the stuff that's making the money is usually not the fun stuff. It's not the glamorous stuff. You just got to grind and think smart and make the right decisions, you know? No, you got to watch the tricksters. A lot of those guys out there with Lamborghinis are renting them. You know what I mean?
Yep. Yeah. And, you know, I think just the fundamental piece is what I always tell people. What I'm going to teach you isn't sexy. There's nothing cute about it. Just like right now, if you say, hey, I want to be a D1 football player. Okay, well, it's 105 degrees here in Texas. We're going to go in the weight room every day and work out with no AC on. You're going to be dehydrated and dripping sweat. And by the end of the week, you're going to know if you want it or not. But there's nothing sexy about that. Now, when you get in front of 100,000 people at Kyle Field, we got the third, fourth largest college football stadium with 112,000 people. Then, yeah, that's cool. But everything else up until that point, there's nothing sexy about it. It's a grind.
Yeah, no, I hear you. So, okay, so you got into real estate then. Like, what made you look to real estate? Like what made that decision pop up? Hey, I'm getting into real estate now.
Man, I just kind of started looking at different career paths. I started networking. You know, I was bouncing around at different events, shaking hands. I'd already graduated, so I had my degree. I went back and started my postgraduate degree. I was going to get my MBA, and as I was working towards that, I was like, all right, what's something that I can control my own destiny? I can set my own schedule. And I did coaching and ministry for a couple of years. And I was like, you know what? Coaching was very political. It's like, well, did you work with this staff? And did you work under this guy? And it's like, well, we need you to have more experience. And I'm like, well, how can I have more experience if I was in the NFL and I was playing? And so I just said, all right, let me get into something that if I put in the work, I'll see the results. And that's what got me into real estate. And I just started pursuing, you know, how to invest. And so in 2008, when the market hit, obviously we know what happened in 2008 is the Great Recession. I started trying to decide, okay, how do I take the seed capital that I have and put it to work and really learn how to manage my own money? And that's what really got me into real estate, is learning to have my own financial literacy.
Yeah, and that's a hard part. A lot of people don't understand that too, because a lot of people will come into money and it disappears versus making that money work for you and like grow. So what was your first deal? Like, what'd your deal look like?
I'll tell you my first book, then I'll tell you my first deal. My first book was Robert Kiyosaki, Who Took My Money? And that book changed my life. And just the concept, you know, the quadrant, really understanding that, the EBSI, and then really understanding that I have to have a career and then my money has to have a career. That really like made sense to me, because I'm like, I put in all this work to make it to the NFL, and I see people become real estate brokers or become entrepreneurs and doctors and athletes just to work that hard to get to the pinnacle of their career, just to hand their money off to a stranger and say, hey, manage that. So I said, no, if I take the same energy that got me to the NFL to be a top draft pick in the first 2 rounds, then I'm going to take that same energy and put it into reading books. And so, I mean, I read 40 books in 16 months, the old school way, no Audible, no YouTube, like page at a time, highlighting. And I just decided, okay, like, how do I go execute this? And so that led me to go do my first deal. My first deal, actually real estate deals, I bought a house in my hometown for my mom, and then I bought a place in Green Bay. But then once I sold those, I actually started investing with a private equity firm called Stillwater Capital. And so I invested with them for 3 years as a limited partner. And those dudes are great, man. They're killing. They actually just got the new PGA headquarters in Frisco. So PGA moved their headquarters to Texas, and Stillwater Capital has got that development. So after doing that with them for 3 years, I went back to College Station and I bought 2 $75,000 duplexes right next to campus. And people were like, why are you buying that crap? And I was like, no, I just want to do it myself. And so I went from investing kind of passively to, let me go do a deal myself. And then I ended up buying the whole street, the whole block, one at a time, and rezoned it, replatted it, went vertical, and did student housing right by campus. And that's kind of what started my development.
Nice. So what, you bought these duplexes and then just knocked them down and built up there?
Yeah. So I bought 2 originally and just started managing them. And they were HUD duplexes, and just kind of learning that process. And I remember getting all the calls and all the HUD inspections. And I told my wife, there's got to be a better way. This ain't it. And then I just started door knocking and sending out letters. And I started just monopoly, buying up the blocks. And I ended up buying 3 or 4 blocks, like back to back to back. And then I went into the city. I got all their codes, started studying zoning, realized I could replat and create more density. And then from that, I scraped everything, replatted, rezoned, did my parking dedication fees. And then I ended up building new construction. So instead of remodeling, I just tore them down, replatted, and then built new construction, student housing.
That's pretty solid. I used to manage my properties too, and I know in the beginning it sucked. Like, what was your experience like when you had those first 2 duplexes, managing them yourself?
It sucked because we had a landline. They were calling all in the night, and it was BS for sure. But I wouldn't have it any other way. I always have this principle, I, we, and they. I need to learn it first. And then we need to learn it together. And then I start leveraging staff and people and talent. And then at some point, it's going to be they. So it's I, myself, then we're doing it together. And then I leverage it to where they're doing it and I'm just managing them. And so now we have a considerable portfolio, right at about 1,000 beds that we've done. And we manage it, a lot of it ourselves, or I started a management company.
So you got these duplexes and you start buying extra properties. What made you think, instead of holding them, like what gave you that idea? You know what, maybe there's a different way and we can repurpose the land basically into something better.
Well, when I was investing with Stillwater Capital back early on, when I was like 22 years old as a limited investor, I would fly in town in the off season and go look at projects. And we were doing a lot of that stuff around Dallas, around the stadium in Prestonwood, SMU. So we were already kind of tearing down, building these, we called them McMansions. We pieced together like 3 lots, rezoned it into 1 lot. So instead of getting density, we would actually rezone it into 1 lot and would build like these 8 to 10,000 square foot specs. And they were selling, bro. So that's kind of where I started seeing that. And when I got to town, everybody here was just buying and remodeling. No one was really tearing down. They was like, why would you buy a property and tear it down? They just couldn't wrap their minds around it. And so I started buying up stuff and then learned something in college. My roommate was dating a soccer player and they would come over, hang out. And I remember they would be fighting over the bathroom because we had like a 2-bed. It was a 4-bed property with 2 baths. And I remember saying, you know what? If I started building new construction and I start matching the bed to the bath, college girls will love it. So I started doing these 4.5s. So I'd give them their own suite, luxury granite countertops, quartz countertops, stainless steel appliances, really put a custom home there and started renting it out. And it just swept through the community like wildfire. And everybody kind of started doing what I was doing. And now you can't get dirt in that community. Just the dirt alone is probably going to run you $500,000. Just the dirt.
So what do you think all those duplexes were worth? What was it worth with the value add? Like once you knocked them down, how much cash did you create by doing that?
A lot.
A lot.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's something interesting too, because I talked to a lot of guys. Everyone thinks, oh yeah, we got to remodel properties. We got to keep it the same. Like if you start thinking about solutions for people, sometimes it might be subdividing the land and breaking it into multiple things. Or sometimes, like you're talking about, building something different. Like this doesn't have to be buying a property and fixing it, you know? So yeah, kudos on that. That's take some balls too. Do stuff like that.
Yeah, I'm pretty fearless, bro. I mean, I got paralyzed, man. I mean, and I'm walking now. I came back from that, you know, like DeMar Hamlin got injured. I didn't have a cardiac arrest, but I got paralyzed on Monday Night Football. And, you know, when you go through hard things in life, at some point, you stop not caring about life, but you stop being like apprehensive. It's like, well, go for it. Why not? And,
right.
Yeah, man. So that was the mentality. And then I'm pretty creative. So I drew a lot of the plans myself. I'm a visionary, so I can kind of see before it happens. I'll tell investors, what's the highest and best use? Highest and best use. And so HBU, so highest and best use. And at the time, being able to replat and add more density, anytime you can get more density on property and not have to pay more for it and be able to go vertical. So if you can go wide and vertical, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah, that makes sense. Now you do a lot in the commercial space now too, right?
We really, after grinding it out like that, because I was acquiring everything myself, I was replatting, rezoning everything myself. I was even building everything myself. And then I would have my leasing team lease it. I had a rental locator and a brokerage, and then I had my management company manage it. That's when I really started pursuing like affiliated businesses. And so like I told you earlier, I have 50 plus companies and under my Terrence Murphy company's portfolio now, because I started realizing like on a real estate transaction, there's about 22 companies getting paid. Title, mortgage, insurance, surveyors, inspectors. I mean, I can go down the list. So I started buying companies that were affiliated to real estate transactions and really started scaling. But that was all very labor intensive. And so at one point I went to my wife, I said, all right, we've grinded. What can we get into where our money can still work, but we're not so involved? And we started studying triple net leasing, corporate backed leases, Starbucks, Buffalo Wild Wings, AT&Ts, places like that we know are going to pay their rent. And so like a Starbucks, it's a 10-year initial term lease. That's usually what they do almost every time on a new construction. And then they have 4 to 5, year renewal. So you're talking 20, 30-year lease. And as long as you can make sense of the debt and the cap and the leverage, it's a no-brainer. So we started buying up triple net properties around the nation. We really like Texas. We like North Carolinas. We like the Carolinas. We like Georgia. And we just started doing that. And then that led me into the multifamily that we're doing now. So we just closed a $42 million apartment complex, 240 units in Dallas. We're working on a $45 million apartment complex right now. That's 250 units in Houston. So now we're buying kind of class A or B plus multifamily, and it's been going well.
That's pretty solid. On the commercial stuff, are you buying the properties with the tenants in them, or are you buying the property and then finding the tenant?
Great question. So one of the things I wanted to do is take out the labor intensive part that I'd already been doing, my student housing, my urban development. And so what I do is I find developers. I even started talking to Starbucks corporate, because, they have agents. So they have brokers that go out and identify locations. And I started really building relationships with them. And I just started following them to markets. But yeah, I would buy the building from a developer. So you're paying a little upside on the, I always say you get it two ways, right? You get it sweat equity. So you can put in the sweat, save the money, or you can write the check and save the time. But either way, you're going to have to pay for it one way or another. And so I would just let the developer develop it. And then I would come in and buy it with the leases in place and everything. Right when they get everybody in and stabilized, I come in behind them and buy it from them.
So you're right. Yeah. Because triple net leases and those kind of tenants, like they're not bothering you. They're staying there. It's not like a single family where they're moving in and out every year, all that kind of stuff. And a triple net, they're not calling you for repairs. Like they're pretty much dealing with everything, right?
They deal with everything. There's some double net plus type stuff, and triple net, unless it's absolute. I always tell people there's a difference between triple net and absolute triple net. Absolute triple net means you have no requirements. If you get a triple net, you may be on the hook for the roof and the foundation or something like that. So you just got to make sure you watch that. But no, we have property managers. Like we have some stuff in Asheville, North Carolina, and Kansas, and here and there. And we have a property manager. So we just check the reporting every month. They help us do all our cams at the end of the year. And it's pretty turnkey.
That's pretty solid. Now you help people do this stuff too, right?
Right now, obviously, I'm a real estate broker. So I started TM5. It was our real estate company from scratch. It was just I just said, you know what? I'm leaving Keller Williams. I'm going to go start my own brokerage. And I did. And we scaled it to 1.4 billion in sales. And that was also a very labor intensive career, because being a broker, you're kind of having to babysit and coach everybody and kind of walk everybody through everything. But we had a lot of great success. We had some really, really competitive, young, hungry agents. And we were one of the top brokers in the nation. Probably about 10 offers over 10 years from like Berkshire Hathaways and Compass to buy our brokerage. But I merged it with eXp Realty. So now I'm actually expanding my brokerage into all 50 states and into 25 countries. It's been going well.
Nice. That's pretty solid. I hear pretty good things about eXp.
Yes, it's been life-changing for me. And I've been really blessed by it. And actually, I've been attracting, because everybody knew me as an independent broker, but also as a producer. Because like I said, I was the top 1% in the nation. But being able to have eXp's global exposure and reach and expansion and tools, eXp's tools are second to none. It's ridiculous.
So let me ask you this. So you're in multiple facets of real estate. Which one's your favorite? Like, what part do you like the best?
Probably sitting on my ranch on my tractor.
Right.
I bought ranches. I bought ranches in Texas that have road frontage. And then I do some cattle and some hay and Angus cattle and Brangus cattle. But I like buying ranches and cleaning them up, fencing, ponds, and then just sitting on them and holding them. But getting on my tractor and being on my ranch, second to none.
That's pretty cool. Hey, now you have a podcast too. What's your podcast name?
Yeah, so podcast we started about a year and a half ago. Because I do so many different things in real estate, I couldn't name it one or the other. I'm a builder, I'm a developer, I'm an investor, or whatever. I'm a venture capitalist, like I invest in real estate tech companies. So I just it was called The Real Estate Entrepreneur with Terrence Murphy. So it's on Apple, it's on Audible, it's on Spotify, it's on all the major channels, and it's done really well, man. We did 150,000 downloads in the first year and a half. But yeah, I'm just talking about all these different facets, right? Like I don't want to be boxed in just to one thing. I'm too creative. So I bring in people from all backgrounds doing a lot of different things in real estate. And so they're all real estate entrepreneurs.
That's solid. What made you start that? Because before the show, we were talking about like what a grind podcasts are. It's a lot of work in the back end. Like what made you start and be like, hey, I'm just going to start a podcast?
Yeah, man, I'm really an introvert by nature. I'm at a point in my life, and I've always been this way. I don't really do anything to try to impress people because I've learned as an athlete, right? You go out and you give your soul to the game. You catch 4 touchdowns, you're beat up, you can barely walk, and you drop one ball the next week and people knowing you, right? And so I've just learned you can't really put your worth in that. But what I started is my wife wanted me to celebrate more. And so I put up a post. I don't post a lot, but I put up a post about us acquiring this commercial strip center. And dude, it went viral. It had like 1.5 million shares in like 2 weeks. And well, from that, there was a lot of like backlash in a sense where, not backlash in a negative, but a lot of people reaching out. Do you have an ebook? Do you have a book? Do you have a podcast? Do you have a YouTube channel? I didn't have anything. And that just let you know, like I didn't post that for attention. And so everybody's like, what do you have that we can buy or support? And I was like, I don't have. So that's when I started the podcast like a year later, because I had so many people asking me questions and I was trying to like respond on Instagram and LinkedIn to everybody. And my wife one night said, you can't spend every night doing that. Like you got to figure out a way to leverage it. And the best way at the time, the easiest way for me was to start a YouTube channel and a podcast. And so that's when I started kind of putting the content out.
Now you say, okay, so you got the deal and you say your wife told you have to celebrate. Are you like one of the kind of guys that just like keep grinding and crushing and just keep on moving?
Yeah. Which isn't great. It's weird because in sports, you kind of get programmed. Like you don't really get a chance to celebrate. Like you could go out and have a great game. I remember when we beat the number 1 team in the nation at home in Kyle Field. I had 2 touchdowns. We beat OU at the time. OU was like the Alabama of college football at the time. We beat OU at home at Kyle Field. First time it ever happened in 100 years at our school. I had 2 touchdowns, 135 yards on like 4 touches. Great game. We celebrate that night. Next day, we watch film. Next game. Like, you don't really get a chance to celebrate. And then this is vice versa. If you go out and have a terrible game and you could just be down on yourself, we lost because of me, and you watch your film, you got to just throw it in the trash and move on to the next week. So I've carried that into business. And so my wife always tries to help me get out of that mindset.
That's something important. I was just talking with Steve Trang. I don't know if you know him about the same thing. It's like, because I'm built, it's like, okay, you hit a goal, good, keep going. And it's a lot of people are like, no, you got to savor the moment for a minute, or it's kind of like an addiction. It's like you got to keep hitting goals and goals and goals. So it's pretty interesting. It's good for her forcing you to do that.
Well, and I learned too, man, in life, just like the game of football, when it was over, it was over. And, and I read this thing the other day. It says, the only people that are going to remember that you worked 80 hours a week and sacrificed weekends are your kids. And so I've always tried to keep that balance of getting home on time, playing with the kids, hanging out with them. I don't miss anything. Most of everything they're involved in, I'm coaching or I'm an assistant coach. And I just try to be really present. And I retired 2 years ago and just took, COVID gave me a perfect time to like take a step back. So I retired at 38 and just kind of reevaluated what was life about. And I sold some companies, kind of restructured some things, brought my staff down. And now I'm just focused on doing stuff that I enjoy or that I'm still passionate about.
Yeah, that's cool, man. Yeah, that's important too, finding the balance. Like, you're right. Yeah, your kids are the ones that know when you missed everything. Everyone else doesn't.
Yeah. You can't let it happen. And then as they get older, a lot of the times these deals, no one's going to read your tombstone and say, hey, you were an NFL football player. You know what I mean? It's like, truly, did you enjoy your life? And I think that's what we don't do in America. We're just told to work, go. And busy, busy, busy. And I'm really fighting that right now. And it's a battle, man, you know, to not be busy and to not be achieving and chasing and hunting. Because when you're wired like that, it's a restructure of the brain. So there's a great book out that I read, and it's not my book, but it's called Untethered Soul. And that book's really, really changed my life, man. So I would encourage you to read it, Brian.
Untethered Soul. Yeah, okay, cool. I'll check that out. I get the same problem. It's I think a lot of guys in business have that problem.
And I think, you know, I always realize too, it's who we are, the real guys. But then there's a lot of imposters out there, right? That are doing the talk, but not walking the walk. And that irks me. So I'm now really trying to balance like who I give my time to, who I let in my circle, like where am I involved? Because I used to say yes to everything and I used to be everywhere. And sometimes, you know, your value goes up when you aren't as accessible. So I really just tried to manage where I'm giving my time to and who I'm giving my time to.
Yeah, that's a big one too. I think Steve Jobs said, he said like 100 good ideas are going to come on your plate all the time. The goal to be a success is say no to 99 and pick the right one that you want to spend your time on, right?
Yep. And that's so hard to do, bro.
Really hard. Yeah, especially in real estate too. There's so many different things you can be doing and so many smart people. It's like, but you only have the amount of time you have, and then you got to balance it also. Yeah, you're right. You just got to tell people no. Hey, Terrence, well, so if anyone wants to reach out, what's the best way to connect with you?
Yeah, man, I'll say 2 ways. My website, which is just terrencemurphy.com. People always spell it wrong and they're like, well, I can't find it. It's TERRENCE. Find me there, and then find me on Instagram or LinkedIn. My Instagram is just Terrence C. Murphy. But yeah, man, reach out to me on Instagram. I'm always trying to put up some content here and there. I got the YouTube channel now. It's Terrence C. Murphy also. But yeah, man, anything I can do to help you, Brian, in the future, if you got deals you're looking at, multifamily, syndicated stuff, we'll love to support you.
Yeah, thanks, man. Yeah, appreciate you coming on. And hey, everyone, thanks for listening. Remember, hey, if you guys are looking for leads, motivated sellers, also hit us up at motivatedleads.com. And thanks, Terrence. Check out his website. They'll be in the show notes. Thanks for coming on, man. We appreciate you.